All right, class. First off, as always, good day. I'm glad you're here. Today we are going to be starting the World War One section. Okay. Now, here's the thing with the U.S. We do not join World War One right off the back. Okay, so that's what this first lesson is going to be about. While the war is starting and going on, the U.S. was doing their own thing, and we're going to get into that in 1 second. Okay, so let's go over the objectives today. We're going to analyze the significance of the suffrage movement. We're going to examine the importance of prohibition movement, and we're going to create an argument on who had more influence on one of these particular things. Was it religion, women, or employers? So we're going to be looking at that. Okay. So here's your warm-up picture. The first question asks you what's happening here. Okay, to put it in the complete sentence, what is happening here? Now, you may or may not recognize what that hand coming out of the water, I think it's water, what that is. Without giving it away, it is an American symbol, an American icon, if you will, that is in New York City. Okay, that should help you out. Okay, the second question asks you, even though you may not know what prohibition means, that's okay. All right, you can see it says in the water or whatever that liquid is. It's okay if you don't know what that means, because the second question asks you, what do you think this artist is trying to say about prohibition? Does it seem like it's a good thing or a bad thing? Okay, so judging from this picture, even though you may not know what the word means, tell me, based off this picture, the way it's drawn and things like that, is prohibition a good thing or a bad thing? Okay, so pause the video, write your response, because we're moving on in 3, 2, 1. All right, so the war is going on in Europe. You know, we have countries like Russia, Austria-Hungary, Germany, France, Serbia, Britain. They are starting to tear Europe into two. Now, the thing is, a lot of Americans basically feel like, hey, we shouldn't get involved. That's their thing over there. There's an ocean between us, between Europe and where the United States is. So let's practice isolationism. Now, the textbook definition of it is this: it's a policy of remaining apart from the affairs or interests of other groups, especially the political affairs of other countries. So that's what a lot of people are saying. You know, that great war is happening over there. Let it happen over there. That has nothing to do with us. You know, did we start it? Are we in any way, form involved in that? No. So let them deal with that. You know, we'll stay over here dealing with our own stuff. And there were two major things that were happening. Change was in the air during World War One. The first big one was the women's suffrage movement. Okay, and the other thing was prohibition. Now, I know the word suffrage sounds like suffer and it sounds bad, but it's really not. The word suffrage means the right to vote. So whenever you hear that term, you know, this type of suffrage or this suffrage, it's not the word suffer. Suffer and suffrage are totally different words, okay? So if someone ever comes up with a little clipboard saying, end the suffrage of the gay lesbian community, you know, end the suffrage of women, you better not sign that, okay? Because basically you're signing a petition saying, yes, the right for them to vote should be taken away. Okay, so anything dealing with suffrage, leave it alone, because everyone has the right to vote right now. Okay, but back in 1848, women did not have the right to vote. Women had not that many rights compared to what they have now. Nowhere near close to the rights they have now. But two ladies, the one on top there, that's Elizabeth Cady Stanton. The other lady is Lucretia Mott. These are the first women to basically say, you know what, we need to get women together and talk about the rights we deserve. So they created the first women's right convention at Seneca Falls, New York. This is truly the birth of the women's suffrage movement, this particular meeting. Now, did a lot of women go? Kind of. I mean, it wasn't just like 4 ladies, but no, it was quite a bit. But we're not talking thousands and thousands and thousands like the convention things we have nowadays. But a lot of women did show up, and basically what they did is they took the Declaration of Independence and changed it to where it added the word women. Now they didn't get the real one, okay, because that's secured, but they took a copy of it and added the word women and woman to it. So when it says, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal, they changed it to be, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men and women are created equal. And then they renamed it the Declaration of Sentiments. Okay. And their whole objective, their whole goal is to bring a call for legal and social change in America that would help women. Now, while they're talking about things, there's some major issues that popped up, and they were really upset about them. One of them is the inability to control their wages. Women could not say, hey, well, I'm the best seamstress, I'm the best maid, I'm the best nanny, I deserve a wage, get paid better because I'm the best. They couldn't do that. They basically got paid all the same, regardless if you're the best or the worst. You got paid the same, and usually that was pretty low. In some places, some states, women could not have property. Now, let's say their father left them a plot of land. Okay, that's fine. But as soon as she got married, that land became the husband's land. And if they say they got divorced, the guy would keep the land, not the woman. And again, speaking of divorce, it was difficult to gain custody in a divorce. Women tried to get divorces, and they never got really what they deserved. So it was easy for men to get a divorce from the woman, but not really easy for the woman to get a divorce. And if she did, she didn't get much. Okay. Above all those things, the number one thing they agreed on that needed to be changed is that women deserve the right to vote. Because if women have the right to vote, then all these other things they can change. They can vote for people to be in office to make those changes. They could have some political power and make life better for themselves. Okay. Now, in 1851, Stanton met this young lady named Susan B. Anthony. That's a picture of her right there when she was already older. And in 1869, Stanton and Anthony created the National Women's Suffrage Association, the NWSA. Okay, and these ladies, they created a journal magazine called The Revolution. And in this magazine, they basically said, how can you, get your husband to change his vote towards this thing? We're going to have a convention on this day to discuss this and that. Because you have to remember, these women could not vote. The only way they could get the right to vote is if men gave them the right to vote. Okay. Now, in the 1890s, 2 other women's right groups joined the NWSA, and then they became known as the National American Women's Suffrage Association. Okay. Now, here's the thing. A lot of guys back then, they felt that women were not responsible with the vote. They felt that, all a politician had to do was, be like, hey, baby, vote for me. And that the girls would be like, oh, my God, he winked at me. Oh, he blew a kiss at me. Oh, I'm going to vote for him. We know better now. We know not, no woman, no self-respecting woman is going to be like, oh, my God, because he winked at me, because he waved at me, I'm going to vote for him now. It's like, really? That's all it takes? You know that they're not going to do that. So that was a thought back then, that women were just going to, all a guy had to do was just wink, charm the ladies a little bit, and then they would vote for him instead of looking at the issues. What do you believe in? Are you going to give women some rights and this and that? What's your policy on foreign affairs? Things like that. They basically thought women were not that bright, that they couldn't handle it. But at the same time, women were starting to make a lot of noise. So by the 1900s, a lot of the guys were like, God, I wish these women would shut up about wanting rights and this and that. And so they're like, okay, fine. You want some rights? Fine. You'll be able to control your wages. You can own some property, geez, crying out loud, just shut up. They thought that would calm them down, bring down the tension, but in reality, it did not. The women were still had that goal in mind to get the right to vote. So they kept going at it, okay? And they kept fighting. Here's your first question. Do you think if it weren't for Stanton, Mott, and Anthony, that the fight for women's suffrage would have even started? Or do you think it was inevitable? Okay? Inevitable, if you don't know, means like it was going to happen. So what do you think? So do you think if these three ladies never existed, the women's suffrage never would have started? Or do you think eventually between that time in 1848 till now, over 100 and, what is that, 180 some years, the women would have got the right to vote? Do you think some women would have got together and said, we deserve this and that? Okay. Or do you think, no. If it wasn't for these three ladies, women would never have the right to vote. So what do you think? Okay. So pause the video, write your response, okay, because we're moving on in 3, 2, 1. All right. So in the 1910s, the number of women who joined the National American Women's Suffrage Association really got big. They got so big that now Congress and even the president had to listen to them. And that's the thing when it comes to political parties, political groups like AARP, and the Disabled Americans, I believe, Association. Those groups are so big now that Congress and the president and people like that have to listen to them, because now they're like, hey, we're a large group and we vote. So if we don't like what you say, if we don't like what you're doing, we will vote you out. And those politicians, they like to have their cushy jobs. They like to have all that stuff. So they'll listen if the numbers are big enough. And now the Women's Association is big enough. So these women are making backroom deals, negotiating, talking, stuff like that. Things out of the public eye. But a new group was created. This new group of women called the National Women's Party, they tried a different tactic. So instead of quietly making deals, negotiating, having meetings, things like that, these women were out and about shouting and picketing. They had the little signs going around the White House, Congress, shouting things in the street, having marches, So they're out there being seen. And then you got this other group who's like talking to senators and congressmen and the president, having meetings and things like that, having lunches. So you got two groups doing two different things, but they had the same objective: to get women the right to vote. It took some time, but finally the amendment passed Congress on June 4th, 1919. And it wasn't ratified until August 18th, 1920. Basically, they had enough states to get it passed and become law. And this became our 19th Amendment. And this is the actual paper, as you can see. Okay. And it became the single largest extension of democratic voting in U.S. history. Because in 1865, yes, African American got the right to vote, but it was only males. Okay, this is females, white women, black women, Latin women. Now they got the right to vote. So it wasn't just one race; it's one sex. Okay. A little interesting thing too. Even though this was aimed towards women, okay, if you look at the bottom where it says article, it says the rights of citizens of the United States to vote should not be denied or abridged by the United States or any state on account of sex. Because the thing is, I think it was like the past like 4 years ago, 5 years ago, or something like that. There were some people who were saying, that the LGBTQ, I think that's the right letters. I'm sorry if I missed one or added one. That their community should not have the right to vote because the 19th Amendment says it's for women, the right to vote. And they no longer declare themselves as a woman, so they shouldn't have the right to vote. Well, look at the wording. It doesn't say, the right to vote cannot be denied if you're a woman. It says on account of sex. It doesn't specify. That's why that claim, that argument to, we should take away their right to vote because it's not on the 19th Amendment. That's why that claim doesn't work. Because it does say on there, on account of sex. It doesn't say male, female, or other. Okay? It doesn't say, it just says on account of sex, which is any type. Okay? So here's your next question. Why do you think it took so long for women to have the right to vote? They basically fought for like 72 years from 1848 till 1920. They fought to get the right to vote. And if you go further back before that, when our country first started, women were not given the right to vote. Women were basically second-class citizens. So add on a couple hundred years to that. Why do you think it took so long for women to get the right to vote? What do you think? All right. So the writing prompts on the bottom if you don't know how to start the sentence, okay? But pause the video, write your response because we're moving on in 3, 2, 1. The next big thing to come out was Prohibition. Now, throughout the 1800s, there was a movement to remove alcohol from different towns, counties, and states. That's what Prohibition means, to get rid of alcohol. Okay. Now, at the beginning of our country, there was a Prohibition movement as well. Religious groups basically try to say that alcohol was evil. Alcohol was the reason there was evil in these communities and things like that. And preachers, preaching on tree stumps and stuff in their churches, saying how evil and disgusting and it's a temptation and nothing good comes from alcohol and things like that. And people followed. People were like, yeah, that's so horrible. Alcohol's so evil. But as time went on, that movement died. But the thing is, there were some states like Maine and Massachusetts that passed strict laws outlawing alcohol. There were some counties. Not all states were like that, but in some counties, in some states, the people were like, we don't want alcohol legal. And they put it to votes and things like that, and it passed. So those places became known as dry counties because you couldn't get an alcohol there. If you went down the road and you crossed into another county, then you can get a drink. But in that area, dry counties, there's no alcohol served there. Okay. Now, by the 1900s, the idea of outlawing alcohol grew again. Okay. This time mainly by women. Okay. Women didn't have the ability to vote yet, but they were able to try to convince the men to change their minds. The biggest argument that women had against alcohol is that they felt it was destroying their families and marriages. They were like, you know what? My husband gets paid on Friday. He goes and drinks after he gets paid. He shows up the next morning drunk, hungover, and there's no money. All the money he was working for was gone. So they were broke, you know. Or they would say like, yeah, he gets drunk, he shows up home, and he's abusive, he's angry, he's beating me, he's beating the children, you know. Or another one too, and or they'd be like, he drinks and then he starts messing with these women, and they have an affair. You know, if it weren't for alcohol, he wouldn't be having an affair. But he's not in his right mind. He's too drunk, and he messes around with other women. So those are three things that women use as examples why alcohol should be illegal. Okay, the men spend all the money when they're drunk that they have, and the family's still broke. They're abusive, hitting the wives and the children, and they have affairs. Again, religious groups, right on top of it again too. They are preaching, saying, yes, the alcohol is horrible. It's the devil's drink. It's temptation right there. Evangelical and Protestant priests were basically saying that saloons, the places where like bars and stuff like that, they were corrupt, ungodly. Nothing good can come from places like that. There's gambling, there's drinking, there's women, who are not clean and proper. So nothing good can come from these places. They just cause temptation. They ruin lives. We should get rid of them. Okay, so there's women and churches, religious groups who are against alcohol. We're going to get to the other one right now. And that would be, might be surprised, factory owners. Now, factory owners, they could care less if the person's religious. They could care less what's going on in the home. All they care about is production of the people at the company, at the business. Now you have to remember, a lot of these guys work in factories, and that's long hours. Anywhere from 12, 16 hours, they're working. The conditions aren't that great. So a lot of times, some of these guys, they go drinking, this and that. They show up to work, like 3 hours later, after they get like an hour's sleep, 2 hours sleep, and they're not in the right mind. They're just, sluggish, things like that. And one person might put their hand next to a gear, and there goes their hand. Somebody might be climbing a ladder, and miss a step and just and hit the ground, bust their back. Somebody could be on a ledge and not pay attention and just lose their balance and fall. It happened. That kind of stuff happened all the time. So they were like, there's too many accidents at the workplace. The production level is really low because these guys are like, oh my God. They're not as fast into making things. They'd be like, boom, 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 boom. Sober, but drunk. It's like, it's going really slow. Or if they're trying to go fast, they're not coordinating, they're going to mess up. So factory owners were like, yeah, we need to get rid of alcohol because production's low and there's too many accidents because these guys are basically drunk. Now, Woodrow Wilson, when the war was going on, he proposed a wartime prohibition. Because I don't know if you guys know this, but stuff like beer, it's made of wheat, barley, and rye. And he's like, well, we could use that wheat to make bread. We can use the barley and rye for other stuff. Vodka that's made from potatoes. And he's like, we could use the potatoes to give to our soldiers overseas. These guys need food. So we don't need alcohol. We need food for our soldiers. So he basically told places, don't make any alcohol. Okay. So during this time, Congress is submitting their paperwork to make alcohol illegal because, again, you have to remember, a lot of men are overseas. Who's left there? Women. At the same time, women looks like they're going to get the right to vote. So these senators and congressmen are like, yeah, you know what? We better vote for this because these women looks like they're going to get the right to vote soon, and we want to be known as the guys who were there for them, the guys who were there to support them and back them up on this whole issue. And it passed. Okay. The 18th Amendment says it bans the manufacturing, transportation, and sales of intoxicating liquor. Okay. Now, I had a student a couple years ago ask me, well, it doesn't say beer. No, but beer is an intoxicating drink. Okay. So there it is. You cannot make it, you cannot sell it, and you cannot move it from place to place. Okay. And it was ratified by 3/4 of the states in 11 months, less than a year. They were able to get the number of votes from the states. And now this became known as the Volstead Act, or as we know it, the Prohibition Act. And it went into effect January 17th, 1920. So a lot of our soldiers coming home from the war and they're like, oh man, I could use a drink. Sorry, you can't. Okay. So here's my next question to you. Who do you think had more of an impact on getting alcohol illegal? Was it pressure from the women, pressure from religion, or pressure from the factory owners? Who do you think and why? Okay. Again, if you don't know how to start the sentence, writing prompts on the bottom to help you out. I think the group that had the biggest impact of getting alcohol illegal was, and you tell me, what do you think it was? Women, religion, the factory owners? Because, and explain. Okay. Now, once you finish with that, you are done with this lesson. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Hopefully you learned something new. All right, so next class, next video, if you missed this week, it's going to be on how the U.S. got into World War I. Okay, so you guys, you take care, you be safe, and I'll see you guys later, okay?